Let's bring in Michael Shoebridge, Director of Defence and Strategy at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks for joining us again, Michael. Do you believe that the Russians have a particular focus on Kiev at the moment?
Yes, Chris, I do. And I think it's because Putin's war has not gone well, whether that's on the ground in Ukraine or it's across the globe or it's domestically, where he's confronting a financial and economic crisis that's much deeper and more rapid than he and his backers in Beijing planned for or expected. So that's why he's getting much bloodier and much more brutal in his ground war, focused on the major cities in Ukraine, Kharkiv and Kiev.
Yeah, I fear we could see terrible repercussions from all that in coming days. Scott Morrison today has announced $50 million US, so a lot more than that in Australian dollars, for military hardware, missiles and the like, to be sent to Ukraine via NATO. He's also tipped in $25 million US for humanitarian assistance. Now, on both counts, will this be useful? Will it help Ukraine substantially? And is it enough from Australia?
Well, it's useful and it's helpful, but it's at the last minute in the middle of a war, not before. And that's the same picture we see in NATO and the EU. Although you've got to say the speed of action of the EU and countries like Germany is breathtaking compared to just 2 weeks ago. Anyone who has time to read German Chancellor Scholz's speech to the German Parliament from Sunday would not recognise German policy in action. So, yes, it's good to see Australia part of this broad international coalition, but this is the start of containing and deterring Putin and Xi as much.
Now, there has been speculation. We heard it first here yesterday from Liberal MP Dave Sharma. It's been mentioned internationally now and at the UN that there could be moves afoot to take Vladimir Putin to the International Criminal Court. Is this a useful strategy? What good will it do in the short term?
Won't do anything in the short term, but Vladimir Putin's name is now connected with other incredibly nasty leaders in our history, like Robert Mugabe. It's pretty unusual to get an individual head of a state sanctioned like Putin has been, and really the precedent is Robert Mugabe. So these steps are useful, but really, let's remember what President Zelensky said when he was asked, did he want to leave the country? He didn't need a ride, he needed ammunition. Well, frankly, to confront this bloody war that Putin's in the middle of in Ukraine, that's what the Ukrainian Defence Force and people need now.
Well, look, while the Russian action is very much tied up in the political character of Vladimir Putin, it's about his ambitions, his sense of Russian empire and his political ruthlessness, I would argue. When it comes to Zelensky, I think what we've seen in the last week is very clear that he represents the aspirations of his entire country, which is why I found these comments on television this morning by Julie Bishop, our former foreign minister, quite surprising. I'll just show you these comments and get your reaction, Michael.
Ukraine, President Zelensky believes that Ukraine is a separate, sovereign, independent state that can make its own decisions about military and economic engagement. The real tragedy for Ukraine is that this is actually a conflict between two political leaders, and it means that the people of both nations will suffer and bear a terrible cost.
Michael, is that the right way to characterise it? This is a nation invading a sovereign state, surely.
This is this line of thinking where Putin has been forced to conduct this war. That is completely false. We know that. Putin has begun this war. It's Putin's war. Those who side with Putin are complicit in his war. And we'll see some of them flushed out at the UN General Assembly vote tomorrow. And Beijing is top of the list. So this is a tragedy inflicted on the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky by Vladimir Putin. It's very simple.
And how seriously should we take Vladimir Putin mobilising standby action for his nuclear forces?
I think this tells us he knows the war is not going as he planned. He wanted a quick shock and awe victory. He was deceived by his own presumptions and expectations and of those around him. He also knows that NATO is a nuclear alliance. And he isn't sufficiently flippant or psychopathic to forget that. So he's trying to stop people assisting Ukraine. That simply is not happening.
Thanks so much for joining us again, Michael.
Thanks, Chris.